Welcome, everybody. This is Choo Choo's final Affordable Housing Month event for the month of May, and we've had a really great month. Um, we're going to get a hard start in about a minute, but I'll go ahead and introduce today's event. This is a future of affordable housing finance. Um, and again, our last event for Affordable Housing Month this month. We've had several events. It's been a really great month so far. Our theme for this year is housing justice for a city where we all belong. And belonging is a really important part of the community development work in San Francisco, where our work is really about how we can work with our communities where they're at and what their needs are, and address the huge crisis that we have of housing affordability. But not just making housing that's affordable, but how do we actually build communities and neighborhoods, and how do our residents have a real say in the kind of development that is right for this city? And that's something that all of our organizations and Choo Choo are devoted towards. Um, Other events we've had for Affordable Housing Month have been, we had our kickoff, which we celebrated on May 3rd. Uh, it was basically celebrating our triumph of our Prop A victory, which many of our organizations, especially our biggest ones, threw down big time for. It was a really lovely event. We also had showcase our organizations work in the community. Our first big event was the Marvel and the Mission, which was celebrating the victory of hundreds of units of affordable housing in the North Mission around the 16th Street BART area. And that was led by Plaza Daisy Sace, Mission Housing Development Corporation, and Mission Economic Development Agency. We also had our homeownership SF Expo on the 18th of May, featuring access to affordable housing programs and home ownership opportunities. And that was spearheaded by one of our Choo Choo organizations, Homeownership SF, with support of many of our other organizations. Last week, we had an event uplifting SROs, the history and needs of making sustainable or SRO housing in San Francisco. And that event also featured a tour of our SRO facilities, many of which are doing incredible work and under tremendous pressure to be able to sustain themselves and come out of a long history of supporting workforce housing and low-income housing in San Francisco. And then on Saturday, we had an event in the southern part of the city, really addressing the BIPOC community's needs for access to housing and home ownership opportunities, especially when we're looking at opportunities for households that are struggling who own their own homes, but are struggling to stay in the city, to be able to maintain generational wealth that's invested in their homes and ensure that residents of the future can remain here. And we're really focusing on that because these are many of the households that are asked to vote on affordable housing bonds, like the regional bond coming up, yet often don't see enough resources that are meeting their needs. And we feel that there's a way for housing preservation programs to be created out of the bonds that are coming forward that could help this population to stay in San Francisco through innovation and new models. So this final event is one that's looking at how we currently finance affordable housing, what the future of affordable housing finance will be. And we have with us William Wilcox from the Mayor's Office of Housing to talk about the current program for affordable housing financing. And we also have the director of the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, Kate Hartley, here to talk about the future of affordable housing financing. And today's event will be facilitated by Caroline Feng from Mission Economic Development Agency, otherwise known as META. And we're also joined by Diwali of Young Community Developers. And I'll let Caroline take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for spending a couple of hours with us to really, especially for folks who may be less familiar with how do we fund affordable housing, to get a little bit more of that insight on how we get some of that revenue and make sure that we can actually get that to that ambitious goal. And so, for some of you who read the introduction, we have an ambitious goal in the Bay Area and across California to preserve and build as many affordable housing homes as possible. In San Francisco alone, it's 47,000 by 2031. And we know that we can't get there if we don't have the financing to make that happen. And so today's conversation is, what kind of financing tools do we have out there? I'm going to kick it off with William Wilcox from the Mayor's Office of Housing Community Development. Before I do, I just want to share our own story. Again, my name is Caroline Fang, and I am with Mission Economic Development Agency and the president of CCHO. One of the key things that we've learned as an organization that has gone from a services agency to an affordable housing developer and owner is, if we don't put public-private investment into affordable housing, then we will lose our families. And our families have been so important to that belonging in both San Francisco as well as in the Bay Area, and being able to stay here. And so just in the last decade alone, we've been able to see $728 million of public and private investment so that we could build 1,200 units just in the Mission and surrounding areas as Meta. And so we know that that's the kind of money that we're talking about to really finance that so-called then 42,000 units, 47,000 units that we need for San Francisco. So I'm really excited that we have William to kick us off in starting to think about what are some of those tools that we can use beyond what we as affordable housing developers, for those who are more traditionally in this work, beyond our low-income housing tax credits and the bond financing that we use at the state level to put more units in the area. And then we'll have Kate talk a little bit more about how we can go beyond what we have already put in place. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then lastly, Diwali will really share some of the stories from groups like Young Community Developers that will put those dollars to work, and we'll make sure that we will build those 47,000 units as soon as we get the various tools in place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to William. William, if you want to go ahead and bring up your slide deck, and I will put myself on mute.
Hi, everybody. As Caroline mentioned, my name is William Wilcox. I'm the bond program manager at the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. And I just wanted to talk about some newer tools we have that I think create some new opportunities for housing finance to support affordable housing. So you'll all be familiar with our existing model, which is soft debt and tax 4% LIHTC equity, and then maybe a little bit of permanent loan I included in it. But our soft debt, the subsidy money, has to come from GO bonds or inclusionary fees. Similarly, at the state level, they're also funded by GO bonds, or ASIC, which is funded by the carbon cap and trade. And all of these things require an ongoing refilling. We run out of the money, we allocate it all, and then we have to go back to the voters or create some new source. We don't really have an ongoing replenished source at the moment. And we just passed Prop A, which is really exciting, will allow us to continue to do many of the transactions we have in our pipeline. But to think beyond what our traditional pipeline has been and what's available, I want to highlight some other opportunities for ways you can structure a project. And we're open to doing creative new types of deals, and we've continued to do that. And I know our developers are really at the forefront of coming up with fascinating new ways to keep our community stable and support our low-income households. So the first is just thinking differently about normal bonds that you go to CIDLAC for and pair with 4% low-income housing tax credits. And because you don't have to do a bond deal that includes a lot of soft debt. It can either be bringing bonds into your small site acquisition plan or another similar existing program, or doing bonds as part of a mixed income acquisition, and that is your affordable, that pays for your rehab on the affordable, or bringing it into a new construction mixed income project. These are all opportunities, and while CIDLAC has been competitive since 2020, the last 2 years or so, there have been lots of bonds left over for new construction at the end of the year, and even for rehab. $1 billion went to rehab last year. So there is opportunities to go after that as long as you are not asking for state credits. You can go and get bonds and tax credit equity for more creative uses. And another tool that we've started to use here at MOHCD is 501c3 bond issuance. Now, we can issue these just the same as we would any other conduit normal 4% deal, but this does not have to come from CIDLAC. There's a few different ways to meet the affordability requirements. You can do the normal 20 at 50 AMI or 40% at 60 AMI, or alternatively 75% at 80 AMI. We've used this on a new construction project that had the HCD accelerator money. We've been starting to look at acquisition with this debt tool. In order to access this, you just must meet those affordability requirements, go through some of the normal bond hoopla, the TEFRA meeting, and then doing the issuance resolution at the board and the bond council stuff. But otherwise, there's no CIDLAC, there's no waiting list. This is fully over the counter. It can be a normal drawdown bond. So a normal construction loan that can come as a private placement. The one we did already was with Chase, and it was a private placement loan that went from construction to a perm loan. Or we've looked at public sale options where you sell into the municipal bond market. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored enterprises, also offer options within this. So there's a lot of options to use. This debt doesn't come with any tax credit equity, but it is lower cost and it is accessible and is a valuable tool we think can be used, particularly in the current housing market where you might be able to find a really good deal. And maybe the mixed income aspect will help finance that. So this is just an opportunity that we want people to take a look at. And MOHCD is the issuer, and I can always help talk through options with folks who are interested. Similarly, we've started over the past few years doing bond recycling, which is where when you go at perm conversion, you pay down your big construction loan, you have all this extra tax exempt authority that normally poofs into the air, but we can save it. And now we capture that magic tax exemption dust, and we use our partnership with CalHFA to preserve it. And then we can lend out tax exempt debt to other projects that qualify as affordable. Once again, the normal LIHTC affordability rules, 20% at 50 AMI or 40% at 60 AMI. You can also, if you do a larger project, you can just use the tax exempt debt for a qualifying portion of the building. If you condo it off, this, like the C3 bonds, is non-competitive, over-the-counter allocation, and CalHFA actually serves as the issuer as part of the partnership we have with them. You can use it for new construction, acquisition, or rehab. The only challenge is you do have to draw it all down at closing. 100% has to be drawn down, and you can reinvest that, but there's some negative arbitrage challenges. You can also do this as a private placement or public sale. So there's a lot of options to use this debt, and you don't have to be 100% for profit. So if this was part of a partnership, you don't have to be 100% not for profit. So if this was part of a joint venture partnership, this might be a valuable tool. We saw a joint venture between Mercy and Related use them on another accelerator project. So there's opportunities for using them as the additional taxable tail on a rehab project out in the Bayview. Actually doing a 100% recycled bond project that's about to close at the Potrero Power Station. So these are just sort of untapped resources that we have a lot of to provide lower cost debt. And just an opportunity that I think people can consider. We have some other upcoming new programs as well, including funding from the Inflation Reduction Act that's coming out through the EPA. There's two programs, the NCIF and CCIA, and I'm hopeful that those will provide a good amount of money to do more green retrofit work on our rehabs and support some of our new construction that already has great environmental aspects to it. There's also additional tax credit opportunities from the Inflation Reduction Act that I think will make solar tax credits a lot more usable in our projects. We're also looking at Faircloth to RAD, which uses old like public housing authority to convert those into vouchers that we hope to integrate into some of our new construction pipeline to support loss. We're working on figuring that project out right now with the Housing Authority and with HUD. We'll also be updating our past loan program that I think many of you might be familiar with from the Small Sites program. So we are currently running out of pens. We have $80 million left to issue in a final tranche, and then most of that, a lot of that is already spoken for. So we'll hopefully be using the new funds from BAHFA to re-up our preservation loan fund and continue to provide perm debt on both portfolio rehabs and small sites acquisitions. MOHCD has also been working on some innovation projects with the Housing Accelerator Fund and Tipping Point and Mercy Housing to try and simplify design and focus on cost containment. We'll continue to try and work our per unit costs down and structurally address that. And we also are really excited with the additional funding options from BAHFA and have a lot of fun ideas and I think different ways that we can do more non-traditional projects. And I can take some questions now maybe, or I think maybe take questions afterwards, whatever Caroline thinks works. I can't really.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any immediate questions. So maybe let me set some context as people are gearing up for feeling more comfortable to put questions on the chat or in person. I just wanted to share general context. So for those who are jumping in really deep to Affordable Housing Financing 101, the way we fund affordable housing is it typically requires, in order to get to the levels of affordability, which I know all of us really want to make sure that we both are funding folks at the deepest of income levels, what we call anything below 30% of area median income, all the way to the higher levels. We really need to have funding from our local, state, and federal taxpayer dollars. And then once we get those funds that agencies like Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development put in and get as a local agency, then they can work with an affordable housing developer to find innovative ways to actually fund a particular project. So when we talk about affordable housing financing, we're talking both at a sort of very high level of how do we even get money for those state, local, and federal funds, and then separately, how do we then put that specifically into a project? And so really appreciate William helping us to think through, hey, what are some of the ways that as developers, we can really think about how we can be a little bit, continue to be creative in terms of how we might use limited local dollars to be able to expand the number of buildings that we can either purchase and preserve, or that we can build brand new for affordable housing. Are there questions or thoughts from folks? And if not, then we can gather the questions at the end. I'm going to switch over to Kate, who's going to take us to a slightly different level. This is why I wanted to make sure we're doing the introductions, right? So, Kate is with the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency, and Kate can definitely do her own introductions, but I'll just kind of share that in order to get the type of financing that William is talking about, sometimes you get it directly from the project being able to raise financing for itself. But in addition to that, it's a lot of dollars. And so those dollars to get to, in San Francisco's case, 42,000, requires us to pass bonds like Proposition A. And in addition to that, we're looking at new financing tools where we can get more dollars locally, regionally, to be able to make that happen. And that's how we're going to get there, because as much as we'd like to say that the market can actually fund affordable housing, we're not going to get there unless we actually have more taxpayer dollars. And so with that, I am going to turn over to Kate so that Kate can share how we're going to get there and bring up her slide deck.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see you all. And thank you to John and Caroline and Charlie for the invitation. And really great to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. So let me bring my deck up. Okay. And I just want to hit play. Okay, here we go. Let's see. So, so many of you have been part of this process to work on creating a regional housing effort. And we've been at it a long time. It started in earnest in 2017. And again, some of you all may have participated in the committee to house the Bay Area that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission hosted and starting in 2017. Really, the goal was of housing stakeholders and big tent groupings of, contractors and developers and finance people and government people and, everybody, tenant advocates, everyone who's interested in housing really came together and said, this whole DIY thing is not working. 101 cities in the Bay Area, 9 counties, we're all on our own for the most part when it comes to addressing our housing needs, and we just haven't done a good job. So finally, David Chu, our hometown hero, carried the BAHFA legislation in 2019 and created the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. And our mandate, our mission, and our powers are located in state statute. Our authority and power is to raise revenue regionally for the 3 Ps. So production, preservation, and the protection of vulnerable residents. And part of our mandate also is to work in collaboration with cities and counties. Our goal is to really add value to the work that's already going on. William talked about some really cool things happening in San Francisco, and I know that Diwali will talk about her excellent projects at YCD. But we want to add value and bring more resources. And while we're at it, we are intent on creating systems change that will help the region overall. So next month on June 26th is our final internal approvals meeting to put a $20 billion general obligation bond for housing on the November ballot. And our projections show that we can produce and preserve as a 9-county region about 72,000 homes with affordable homes with this money. And the voters will be the final arbiters of whether we can move forward. The uses of the funds are prescribed in our enabling statute, BAHFA statute, as well as the Constitution. This would be such an ambitious and tremendous event for us as a region to address our housing needs. And you can see the values that would attach to every single county. We've never, ever had all 9 counties working together at the same time with unprecedented resources on affordable housing. So the prospects of this bond are really exciting. And you can see San Francisco's value would be $2.4 billion. Again, an unprecedented amount of funds, but every county would have resources that they've never had before. So as I said, the rules about how this money can be spent are located in our enabling statute. And one thing I really like about our statute is that it is very prescriptive about this is for affordable housing, but it also respects the diversity of the Bay Area. So what might work up in Solano County, meeting the housing needs, like maybe there's agricultural worker housing needed in Solano, or ADU financing, is going to be different than what San Francisco needs. And so the 80% of the funds go back to the county of origin according to assessed property values. It's a return to source model. And the rules are that over at least 52% of all the funds has to be used on new construction, really addressing our housing shortage. A minimum of 15% of funds have to be used on preservation. And our statute does require a minimum of 5% of funds to be used on tenant protections, things like rental assistance. Unfortunately, the California Constitution currently prohibits that. So we'll have to see how there's a constitutional amendment in discussion right now that might open the door on tenant protections a little bit. If not, then those funds will go to preservation or production. And then this is something that we haven't really seen before in housing programs. 28% of county funds can be used flexibly. And so it just needs to be for housing related uses. It could be for more new construction, it could be for more preservation. Or if you're building a new family development, say in an area that has no open space, no place for the kids to play, a county could decide to spend some of their flexible funds on a housing related park, or maybe some infrastructure improvements to serve the development. So it's got that flexibility built in to honor the diversity of our big 9-county Bay Area. BAHFA is retaining 20% of the funds to create regional programs and create some systems change that I'll talk about in a second. We have pretty much the same rules as the counties and cities, except that we also will devote 10% of our funds to a local government grant program, and we'll be doing grants in every single county. Also, our production money, our new construction money, we are committed to investing those funds also as a return to source target in every county. So for San Francisco, for example, in addition to getting 80% of the funds back that the city pays for through property taxes, we'll be investing in San Francisco too, according to San Francisco's tax payments on the bond. So there's really, what the county taxpayers are paying for, they'll be able to see return to them in new affordable housing investments. So just a bit more for San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors has to approve your expenditure plan. It has to be constitutional. It has to follow the rules of BAHFA's enabling statute. The new construction money must first prioritize projects that meet San Francisco's extremely low income, very low income, and low income RHNA targets. So we really want to get, and our statute requires, get resources where it's needed most. All the housing has to be deed restricted, and the affordability cap is 120% of AMI. So again, there's lots of different uses for these funds. San Francisco can create rental or affordable home ownership. BAHFA's new construction funds are for rental projects only, but preservation is a big part of this effort. ADUs can be financed, commercial to residential conversions. You can create interim housing for to help people get off the streets before they go into permanent supportive housing. And then again, those housing related uses with flexible funds are a really nice opportunity. They just need to be clearly tied to housing production. And then for BAHFA, the reason why we're retaining 20% of funds is because we have the opportunity to create a new lending model, a public mortgage lending model that really will be something different. We don't really have that in place right now. So BAHFA intends to become, over time, the go-to lender, construction and perm loans, and then taking the interest and fees earned, instead of having them go where they go now, which is to the shareholder dividends and profits and bonuses for the banks that we work with. I mean, the banks, we need them, but we can instead take those interest and fees. BAHFA can become a self-sustaining lending organization, and most importantly, reinvest the interest and fees we earn back into communities, back into more affordable housing development. So over time, BAHFA will have the ability to be providing subsidies for affordable housing development long after these bonds are spent. And we know this system works because we look to the New York City Housing Development Corporation as our model. They have been around since the 70s, but since the early aughts really focused in on their lending program. And just between 2017 and 2022, they actually provided between $1.5 and $3 billion every single year in tax-exempt debt for affordable housing development. And with those loans that they made, they provided every single year between 100 million and 325 million in subsidies. And that is funding they have that comes from interest that they earn over time. And they finance about 10,000 to 15,000 units a year. New York City's population is roughly the same as the Bay Area population. So we're really excited to follow that successful model and create a new resource for the Bay Area. So again, one more internal approval on June 26th. We're super excited. It's been, a long time coming and a lot of work, especially over the last 2 years, but we think this will be a fantastic new resource for the Bay Area. And that is it for me.
So I have questions for folks while you all are gathering your questions. Can folks put up their hands if they're a Bay Area resident? Right. So, I mean, I think this is the one thing that Kate is saying that is pretty amazing, right? Various folks, and I'm seeing in the chat where folks are associated with. We have the challenge in the Bay Area of we may not live where we work, and we also are coming from different jurisdictions in being part of this conversation. And yet at the same time, all of us, I think I saw everybody raise their hands, are all Bay Area residents. And so we actually have the ability with this bond that will be on the ballot in November to really bring together a huge financing source for our various goals in our different jurisdictions. And twinned with what William had shared earlier, in each jurisdiction doing different innovative financing in addition, we will be much closer to really solving this housing crisis that we all intersectionally all are working on across all of our different sets of work. So I'm personally really just excited about this, and thank you, Kate, for sharing what BAHFA can do and what BAHFA is hoping to do in the future. I am also going to, while we're doing this and waiting for folks, I'm going to put a quick plug in. We can't do these events that CCHO does if we don't continue to have folks support CCHO. And Affordable Housing Month is our way of raising awareness about affordable housing and housing justice for all the folks who are across, at least in San Francisco, and it's done across actually the Bay Area. And so really appreciate folks clicking on that link to see if you might be able to continue to support groups like CCHO to not just raise the awareness, but really do the advocacy, which is really the critical part, so that we can get even the legislation that initially passed BAHFA, as well as some of the other legislation that helped us to pass Proposition A for the bond financing. And we can't get to that if we don't have groups like CCHO, which bring together the solidarity of all of our different sets of voices around affordable housing. There are a couple of questions from Kristen, and I hope that we answered your first question. And so I'm just going to read that out. And Kristen was just trying to understand whether or not San Francisco was actually developing funds to lend with the BAHFA funds. And I know, William, you answered in the chat. I don't know if you want to answer in verbally or just to kind of give more detail to what you answered.
Yeah, so we do have a thriving pipeline of new construction deals that I think the BAHFA money would support at the local level, as well as a fully identified pipeline of portfolio rehab work. And I think we would continue to work on both of those, as well as this would allow us to significantly expand our work. And we wouldn't, the only sort of fund ideas we have a few ideas about different products we could lend this through, and one is that if folks are familiar with our Preservation and Seismic Safety Loan Program, PASS, that we use as firm debt in our small sites acquisitions, as well as in some of our portfolio rehab work, we are running out of that money and will re-up a new program that will actually revolve the money through, instead of currently the PASS, just once it goes away, the payments go to pay back the voters who passed the original GO bond back in the 90s.
Thanks, William. I had a quick follow-up question. Hi, everyone. Is the BAHFA or are the BAHFA funds eligible for your operating subsidy program or no? And is that something that I didn't think so. Is that something you had been looking into? Kate, thanks. Shaking your head.
Kate's better qualified to answer.
Um,
I don't think that's bond eligible.
I wish the answer was yes. It's a constitutional prohibition. So you probably know the California Constitution limits GO bond funding to the acquisition and improvement of real property. And so operating subsidies don't count. In fact, you can't even use bond funds to fund a normal operating reserve that every building requires.
Oh, and so the alternative language for the amendment to the Constitution, that's how capitalized reserves could get funded, but if not, is that right?
The advocates working on ACA 1, and we certainly were on board with this, trying to expand those eligible uses of bond funds was a really important goal, because everybody knows you can't create PSH without services dollars and operating subsidies. And so we were hopeful that there would be some opportunity to do that. The amendments to ACA 1 are not currently complete. And so there might be a little opening, but an expansive opening, like just, rental assistance.
Right.
Those are probably unlikely, but stay tuned.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a follow-up question on just what are the eligible uses for flexible, and I think this all falls in the same bucket with what you're talking about, which is we desperately need some funds to, pay for protection enforcement, which we now have the rights to do under SB 567 from the AB 1482, the rent spiking law. But, those funds don't exist anywhere. So I'm assuming that these would not be eligible unless something radically happened to ACA 1, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, that is right. These funds would not be eligible for that kind of non-construction or acquisition activity. We do, on BAHFA's webpage, we have some technical FAQs for housing professionals, and talk about some of the eligible uses of flexible funds. Basically, it's preservation, production, and then housing related uses that are actually construction or improvement of property. And so there's just a few rules that apply, that constitutionality, the conformance with our enabling statute. You can't be funding something that's serving people over 120% of area median income, and it needs a deed restriction. But counties and the direct allocation cities have flexibility in the deed restriction. So, for example, you could buy a parking lot, use the bond funds to pay for a parking lot, do some interim housing, and so long as
our goal is to transition everybody to permanent.
Right, and so you could put a 55-year deed restriction on the property, and then when you had the funding ready to start construction for the permanent supportive housing, you could phase into that.
That's clever. I like that. So there's no, under state law, our lawyers usually tell us those restrictions have to be enforceable within 1 year. But I'm hearing you say maybe there's some flexibility there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't, all the flexible funds are, it's so site specific and use specific that I do recommend you check with your city attorneys and county council.
Got it. And I'll look for your publication. Thank you. Appreciate it.
On our website. Yeah.
So Christian, thank you for your questions because it's actually making me think about two things. One is the immediate, what you're talking about in terms of local subsidies. So San Francisco is also separately putting on the ballot the Housing Opportunity Fund, which will be specifically for extremely low income families to receive local subsidies. It's sort of a companion to our local operating subsidy that we provide for supportive housing. Because we're seeing that a lot of our ELI families can't necessarily get access to that if they're not in permanent supportive housing. So something just again as an advocate to think about. And then separately, I know Kate had flashed on the screen the local expenditure plan process. And so I'd be curious how San Jose is developing that and just overall across the Bay Area, how different jurisdictions are developing that, both with direct feedback from their local constituency as well as in concert with each other, where you all are maybe connecting with each other to kind of say, oh, well, that's interesting that San Francisco is doing it that way in terms of how they may be thinking about allocating the funds that may or may not be appropriate for other jurisdictions. So something just to kind of to also be thinking about too, and really appreciate the conversation we're having.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. The Housing Opportunity Fund in San Francisco, what's the source for that it's eligible to pay for services?
Somebody else who's an advocate who's pushing for it.
William?
I think we're
Chi-Chi?
taking it from general budget, which is, I think, another conversation.
LOSP is at least paid for from the general fund.
Yeah, and
operating subsidy program, and we have another program that we paid for, the senior operating subsidy, that is somewhat similar, that I think is a state award that we largely used it for. I forget which. It's one of those weird state programs.
It's SB2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so no, it is coming, I think, out of general. So it's coming out of tax dollars that are specifically maybe allocated towards housing, but it would also have gone towards the general fund. And so I think that becomes also a general budget question of are we willing to allocate that from the budget? Teresa? And I do want to give opportunity for us to then switch over to Diwali. So I'm going to take one more question and then I'm going to switch over to Diwali. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a question regarding the protection, because you mentioned that rental assistance, because of the, I believe, some charter or state constitutionalism. But so if that doesn't apply for rentals, what would be the protection? What would be the funding for protection be for? Or what kind of conversation has been around on that?
Well, I can answer regarding what BAHFA is doing now. So over time, as we grow as a lending public interest lender, we hope to have resources available where we can provide some programmatic funds for tenant protections. We're also building into our programs to the greatest extent that we can tenant protections beyond what exists in the industry overall. So for example, just like San Francisco does, rather than capping annual rent increases at AMI, which since the 2014 or so has been very, very difficult for households to manage because AMI has gone up so much in the region. We have, for the preservation, we have some small preservation projects that are happening right now that we're working on. We have a lesser of cap of either AMI or 4%, whichever is less. We also are going to be putting a small amount of money out for preservation projects. And rather than having a residual receipts loan product that we will collect as repayment on our loans, we're asking the developers to put that funding into a tenant rent reserve so that over time, as you know, if tenants get into some trouble, lose a job, need some help, have a health issue, whatever the case may be, the owner of the property can draw on that rent reserve to assist those tenants and help them, as kind of a rainy day fund. And then we have a welfare tax exemption preservation program that is a middle income housing program where we will help facilitate the preservation of housing at 80% area median income and below. And what we require of developers is that once they reach a certain level of cash flow, which is, you know, not too high, and because they have to income certify tenants every year in order to get the welfare tax exemption, we require them to look at their tenants, their households that are in their buildings, and identify any household that is severely rent burdened. And then take that excess cash flow that they have and reduce the rents on the severely rent burdened tenants. So we're trying to bake in some tenant protections until such, and up to into our programs until such time as we have more resources.
Thanks, Kate, for sharing that. I'm going to switch us over to, well, okay, let's say we get all this affordable housing financing. What kind of great projects and organizations could we actually make sure then are actually going to be able to build it? And so, Diwali, if you want to take it, I see you have your slide deck up. If you want to take it from here.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Diwali. Some of you all I know, some of you all I have not met. I am the Chief Program Officer at Young Community Developers, and we are based in District 10 of San Francisco. Let's see, for those who don't know, just a little history on the organization. We've been in the Bayview for about 50 years, and we really focus around breaking cycles of generational poverty. And historically, our services really centered around workforce, and now we've grown into education. We have some very important special initiatives that we lead, as well as housing. And we got into the housing space in 2016 when I came on board back then as the director of housing. At that time, we had one project completed in the shipyard, for those who are familiar, Pacific Point. And since then, we've had a few projects delayed and put on pause. And I'm going to just review with you all the projects that we currently have in pre-dev. So I only have, unfortunately, one photo of a project that we are working on, which is 249 Pennsylvania with our dear TNDC. And we also have a project 650 Divisadero that we're working on with the Jonathan Rose Company. And we have a project Pier 70 that we are working on with CCDC, which is currently on hold due to delays with the principal developer. And so, you know, YCD stepped into this space really because we saw opportunities in the shipyard and at Candlestick that were happening in the neighborhood, as well as many of us know the rapid loss of Black households throughout San Francisco. And so that's when I really came in and started to work on building out a team. We have now, we have a team of project managers. We have someone who really focuses on our housing policy work, as well as a housing services team that delivers rental assistance that came about through the pandemic. And our goal is to become a CDC. And I'm just really excited to be here today on this panel to talk with everyone and to just hear about the great work that is being done. Because, you know, as I shared this pipeline that we have with you all, the goal is to really see these projects through. And, you know, a big piece of the conversation that we're learning as, again, we're building our capacity and our learning curve in the housing space. And fortunate to have such great partners, not only through the city, but through other community-based developers who are really, you know, assisting us and helping us learn what it takes to see projects through. But just noting how important it is to have these financing models so that we can be a part of creating housing and creating space for the households, not only currently in District 10 and the Black households throughout San Francisco, who we really do try to hone in and focus on, but, you know, hopefully create space and opportunity for folks to come back. And, you know, this conversation just highlights how important it is to keep our pot full of financing options And, you know, this is just what we have to continue to focus on, continue to have these conversations in spaces like this through CCHO. And it does take collaboration and teamwork, which again, as we enter this space, we know how important it is just learning the day-to-day to get and keep these projects going. And the work that Kate and William are doing is just instrumental and super helpful, not only for our organization, but, you know, everyone throughout the Bay Area. So with that, that's all I have.
Thanks, Diwali.
Mhm.
And I think the highlighting of YCD, we have many folks who do affordable housing across the Bay Area and specifically in San Francisco. And then the groups like YCD who are particularly focused on the folks who have been forced out of San Francisco and really figuring out how do we both make sure that those folks can stay or return to San Francisco, and also how do we make sure that we have the capacity of groups that are actually not just focused on the housing, but also focused on the whole community that really it takes to support these families and seniors as they stay in San Francisco. And so really, you know, think that if we are investing in affordable housing, we're also investing in our local community and investing in the place that we all belong. And so in order to do that, we really want to think about like where does that financing go, and where does that financing also make sure that it's continuing to invest in our community. So thank you, Diwali, for sharing with us some of the examples from YCD of what opportunities, if we get this financing, both the kinds that William is talking about, as well as the potential November bond, where we could quickly deploy those funds to really continue to build the type of housing that will make sure that San Francisco and the rest of the Bay Area stay strong. And so with that, I'm going to open it back up to questions. Any questions from folks?
I have a question perhaps for both Kate and William. And just having experience over the past 15 years in San Francisco, and even earlier than that, a steady out-migration of working class BIPOC residents, especially the Black community. And we look at the southern neighborhoods of the city where there's going to be, we have more of an inversion of the typical tenant-landlord relationship, where we have mostly single-family homeowners who are a lot of our voters. What's being prepared and planned for real benefits out of the local effort and the regional effort for meeting the needs of property rich but cash poor households in San Francisco, to create a greater sense of belonging? What opportunities and how can CCHO as an organization help to build a bridge between these communities and the resources that can enable them to access support from the bonds?
Well, I can jump in, but William, you probably have specifics. I mean, many homeowners who are property rich and cash poor cannot afford to take care of deferred maintenance. That is an eligible bond expense. And the counties are in really good position to use their bond funds for that use because of the flexibility that they have on the length of the deed restriction. You know, a lot of funding you have requires a 55-year deed restriction, and that doesn't work for a single family homeowner. You know, you want to fix up the home and then let people live their lives and, you know, transfer the property to the heirs. But the counties are in a place where they could do a shorter deed restriction. You could do a 10-year declining balance. That is, for every year that the homeowner lives in the property, you know, you reduce the amount owed back by 10%. And, you know, things like that. There's a lot of things to do, but mainly it's taking care of habitability issues so people can stay in their homes. The other thing that could be done is for low-income homeowners to fund rent-producing accessory dwelling units so that they can have some cash flow and you're producing more housing. and helping those homeowners stay in their home. But William, I don't know if you want to add or correct me.
My job is on the multifamily team, so this is certainly not my area of expertise, though I do know MOHCD does have a repair program for low-income homeowners already, and I think this could be an opportunity to expand that, though we do not have the expenditure plan done, and that is, as I mentioned, not my area of expertise.
And I would just highlight that that's obviously something I think that definitely is relevant for District 10 throughout San Francisco. And I know in the past I worked for the County of San Mateo. It was a very successful way of helping, you know, the households that we're talking about, to give them opportunities to deal, especially with the habitability issues. So just echoing that sentiment.
Thank you. Appreciate the responses.
Thank you. And I'm going to shift to Kristen's questions.
I like that it was on stack. Thanks, Caroline. I just wanted to ask Diwali, as an organization that wants to become a CDC, what kinds of support do you need and what kinds of skills do you need to acquire or maybe team with others over the next few years?
Definitely one of our big focuses right now is board development, really thinking about bringing new people onto the board, as well as providing learning opportunities for them to understand where our work is growing into, as well as I think just continuing to build our relationships with other organizations throughout the city, which we've really been fortunate. I think San Francisco is a great place where people are willing to collaborate and provide that support. Capacity building dollars have been really helpful coming through the city to help just in terms of staffing as we're building up kind of developer fees and just learning kind of the funds we need to have set aside in order to support the work and the partnerships to get projects done. And yeah, those are kind of the three areas I would highlight for right now. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you.
I know you didn't address the question to me, but I think that just sharing Meta's experience over the last 10 years, it very much echo what Diwali is saying. I think we've been able to appreciate the support of San Francisco and also just being able to grow our own infrastructure, but it couldn't have come without capacity building dollars that our supervisors set aside that said, hey, you know, those first few years, we were fortunate as Meta to initially invest, which all nonprofits, if they're trying to figure this out, we initially invest and scrimp and save to figure it out through grants. And then to be able to say, hey, no, we're actually going to figure out that longer term trajectory for you by providing capacity building dollars, because as Diwali was sharing, the developer fees, because they're based on milestones, especially for low-income housing tax credit projects, means that we are waiting for 3 to 5 years before we see significant fees that will actually support both the staff as well as the organizational development that's necessary to do that pivot and transition. And so having those dollars to support us building out our infrastructure in the meantime and our staffing in the meantime is super critical. And then something that I really appreciate with Kate Hartley's time at MOHCD is also just that kind of willingness to say, hey, that this neighborhood, this set of projects, these are really important to support, because if we can have a pipeline for these organizations that they can start to rely on, then that also ensures that they can actually grow in a smoother manner rather than in this bumpy manner where they're trying to figure it out along with everybody else in terms of competing for opportunities, but instead saying, hey, it's really critical that we invest in these projects and figure out how we and we have to be very thoughtful about legislation, but making sure that we are thinking about that so that the organizations can grow in a smoother manner.
That was helpful, Caroline. Thanks, especially the pipeline of deals. Thoughts. Appreciate it.
Other questions from other folks? I appreciated the healthy conversations that we are able to have in this panel.
So Kate, you mentioned that there'll be a critical vote coming up for the regional housing bond. I think it'll be important for us to mobilize to help make that vote a reality. Um, and could you share with us where you see BAHFA, the authority, actually landing? Are we looking at unanimous vote, and where can we actually apply the greatest advocacy on the board?
Thank you, John. So yeah, the vote is at 9:35 on June 26th. And it's at 375 Beale Street. And we have had so many meetings, so many presentations. Some of my board members have said, "Oh, not you again. Another presentation by you. I'm voting yes, go away." So I do feel confident that we have really strong support from all our board members. You never know. You know, we had a public notice meeting on May 22nd, and a couple of the board members did have some additional issues that they wanted us to clear up or clarify, which we've done. But I think internally we have great support, and I think we will get that last vote that we need. But I appreciate the question. And again, 9:35, June 26th, 375 Beale.
And then maybe I can extend the question. So for those of us looking beyond June 26th, knowing that you will hopefully get the votes that you need, what else can we do to support this if we feel like this is important for affordable housing?
Well, I'm going to turn that back over to Choo, because as a public secretary, my role is limited to providing information, and I can't talk about the campaign, but Choo can. So I'll turn that back to you.
Well, but when does this come up for a public vote, not the board vote? Can you tell us that?
It's the November 5th election.
Ah, thank you.
So Choo has been really working towards building our muscles for the regional bond, and our Prop A campaign was a practice run for that. We've also been working to really align a lot of the politics that the whole political spectrum across the city, which is mostly Democrat. So for the Prop A campaign, we worked with the YIMBY Action to be able to get it to be passed, and we're reaching out to Spur and other organizations who, to build a big tent process for Prop A, and we're doing the same for the regional bond. Just last week, we brought a resolution supporting BAHFA to put place financing of affordable housing on the ballot. And that was voted unanimously by the Democratic County Central Committee in San Francisco. And Choo is also part of the Bay Area Housing for All Coalition, which is led by several organizations, but mostly nonprofit housing. And we're working closely with them on trying to fit inside of a campaign that will be happening across the 9 Bay Area counties, but specifically in San Francisco. So we'll be creating a whole menu of ways for organizations to be involved in the regional bond campaign once BAHFA puts it on the ballot, and we'll be sharing a lot of information about how to get involved. For our mobilization for Prop A, we did in-reach to our residents in our housing. We did voter registration work. We did lit drops in our buildings. We did mobilizations in neighborhoods surrounding our community housing organizations. And we did work on the west side of San Francisco, which is really important to raise. And we'll be doing all of that again, but probably in a much more deliberate way, perhaps with a stronger mail program and messaging program. And the whole approach that we want to have at Choo that's really strong is, how do these investments not just serve the development of affordable housing, but build entire neighborhoods? How do we leverage all the flexible funding that enable greater transit and greater parks and open space? How do we bring in a green economy as we're building? All of this will be looking at the future of San Francisco to create a greater sense of belonging moving forward. So we look forward to partnering with all the organizations that will align with on this incredible endeavor. And we are really excited about the future of affordable housing finance and the work that BAHFA can do and MOHCD can do together with our communities.
I'm going to highlight one more question and then we'll tie it up so that I know we have the hour, but I want to also be thoughtful that like folks have spent a fantastic hour with us. So Lauren was asking about whether or not we have comprehensive lists on public land parcels. And William did share the one that San Francisco has. I was wondering, Christian, do you happen to have the one for San Jose? And if not, that's okay. Oh, you did. Sorry, I missed. I didn't scroll down.
Yeah, I just posted a site where they're typically listed, but we don't, it's just a parcel here and a parcel there, and they go through the process and then it comes down. It's not like a long list. So yes.
And Lauren, do you have a particular interest in asking that question?
Oh, no, I was just wondering about how each city has gone about preparing for the need for production and their contributions in kind and otherwise. So just wanted to know where I could find those. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren, for asking.
Notably, I think due to Kate's excellent leadership at the department, we actually don't sell off of our land. The public land remains owned by the city and is ground leased out to the property. And also, even when our nonprofit developer partners acquire land, we then take the land, ground lease it back to them to increase the public land trust that houses all of our new construction since that was instituted, which I think is a really great program and ensures permanent affordability.
Sounds like San Francisco does the same, or San Jose does the same. Erica, thank you for sharing about separate other court case. And John, do you have more thoughts to share? Otherwise, I was going to wrap us up.
I think I just shared our next steps, and we'll be keeping people informed about how our summer and fall shape up. And I expect that it'll be involved in doing more electoral work and revving up the CCHO action effort.
Yeah, and for folks, if you're interested in more panels like this, I think we're also experimenting with this as CCHO staff and members. And so please do let us know if this was something that was of interest to you, because I think we're looking forward to doing more of these that are more specifically San Francisco focused than some of the other panels that other folks may have, but also definitely would welcome any feedback. So thank you. Well, with that, thank you for spending your hour and a little bit with us. Really appreciate our panelists, again, William, Kate, and Diwali, and really appreciate all of you having so much interest in affordable housing and the work that you do in your day work, as well as whatever you do to support your community. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you maybe somewhere else. Thank you.
You will.
Thank you.
Thank you.